Zektar pressed his four-fingered hand against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the swirling nebula that surrounded the contested mining station. His scaled skin shifted from blue to a nervous purple as he reviewed the tactical display one more time. The hegemony had sent him here as a military observer, tasked with documenting the effectiveness of their new human allies in actual combat. The Velthari had controlled this sector for over 300 cycles. Their insectoid warriors known throughout the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency and hive mind coordination. They had turned the mining station into a fortress, bristling with defensive systems and housing nearly 10,000 soldiers. Every major power in the galaxy had tried to dislodge them at some point, and all had failed. Now the humans claimed they could take it with just 500 troops. Zektar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered nervous laughter. He had studied the human military files extensively since the hegemony had made contact with Earth. On paper, humans seemed almost primitive compared to other galactic powers. Their technology was centuries behind the Velthari. They lacked the natural armor of the Krexni, the telepathic coordination of the Mindari, or the sheer size and strength of the Goliath clans. What they did have, according to the reports, was something the analysts called tactical unpredictability and adaptive aggression. Zektar wasn't sure what those terms meant in practical application, but he was about to find out. The human fleet had arrived. 6 hours ago, 3 small cruisers and a handful of support vessels that looked almost comically tiny next to the massive Velthari dreadnought that had been guarding the station. The insectoids had immediately moved to engage. Confident in their superior firepower and numbers, that confidence had lasted exactly 14 minutes. Zektar watched the tactical replay for the third time, still struggling to understand what he had witnessed. The human ships had scattered the moment the Velthari opened fire, moving in seemingly random patterns that should have made them easy targets. Instead, somehow every shot had missed by mere meters, as if the humans had known exactly where each plasma burst would go before it was fired. Then the humans had done something unprecedented. Instead of trying to match the Velthari's superior firepower, they had simply stopped shooting back. The insectoid commander had ordered a pursuit, thinking the humans were retreating. That's when the trap had been sprung. The human ships had led the dreadnought straight into the nebula's densest region, where sensor readings became unreliable and communication was nearly impossible. In that swirling maze of gas and stellar debris, the humans had somehow managed to coordinate a perfect ambush. All 3 cruisers had emerged from different directions simultaneously, targeting the dreadnought's engine arrays with surgical precision. The mighty Velthari vessel now drifted powerless, its crew trapped inside while human boarding parties prepared to cut their way through the hull. The entire engagement had taken less than an hour, and the humans had accomplished it without losing a single ship, but that was just the opening move. Zektar turned his attention to the main display, where the human ground forces were preparing for their assault on the mining station. He activated his recording equipment and began his official observations. The first thing that struck him was how different human soldiers looked compared to other species warriors. The Velthari were naturally armored with chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect most energy weapons. The Krexni were massive brutes whose hide could stop projectiles. The Mindari moved as one perfect unit, their psychic links allowing instantaneous coordination. Humans looked fragile by comparison. They wore artificial armor that seemed almost primitive, and their weapons appeared to be simple projectile throwers rather than advanced energy systems. Each soldier moved independently, without any obvious coordination or battle-link technology, yet as Zektar watched them prepare for the assault, he began to notice things that made his scales shift from purple to deep orange. The color of unease. The humans weren't moving randomly. Despite having no apparent telepathic or technological coordination, they were positioning themselves with an efficiency that bordered on unnatural. Small groups of soldiers spread out in patterns that seemed chaotic at first glance, but when viewed from above, created overlapping fields of coverage that would make it nearly impossible for defenders to find safe positions. More disturbing was their behavior. Other species warriors prepared for battle with ceremony. Battle cries, or at least some visible sign of preparation for combat. The humans were almost silent. They checked their equipment with mechanical precision, but there was no fear, no excitement, no anticipation. They moved like predators who had already decided the outcome of the hunt. The assault began at 0347 station time. The Velthari had prepared for a conventional attack. Waves of troops attempting to breach the main entrances while siege equipment pounded the outer defenses. It was how every other species had tried to take the station, and why they had all failed. The humans did something else entirely. Instead of attacking the obvious targets, they had spent the past 6 hours studying the station's design and identifying weaknesses that no one else had thought to exploit. The mining facility had dozens of maintenance shafts, cooling vents, and service tunnels that were too small for most species to use effectively. To the Velthari, these were insignificant vulnerabilities, easily monitored and defended. But humans, with their smaller stature and flexible frames, could move through spaces that would be impossible for most other species. Zektar watched in amazement as human soldiers simply vanished into the station's infrastructure. They moved through ventilation systems like they had been designed for it, cutting through bulkheads with portable tools, and emerging in areas that the Velthari had never expected to defend. The insectoids' response was predictably coordinated. Alarm signals flashed throughout the hive mind network, and warriors began converging on the breach points with mechanical precision. But every time they arrived, the humans had already moved on. What should have been a simple containment operation turned into a nightmare of confusion. The humans weren't fighting like any other species the Velthari had faced. Instead of holding positions or advancing along predictable routes, they struck fast and then disappeared, leaving behind damaged equipment and confused defenders. Zektar realized he was watching something unprecedented in galactic warfare. The humans weren't trying to overwhelm their enemies with superior force or technology. They were using the station's own structure against its defenders, turning every corridor into a potential ambush point and every room into a trap. The Velthari tried to adapt, splitting their forces to cover more areas and setting up defensive positions at key choke points. But the humans seemed to anticipate every countermove. When the insectoids reinforced one area, the humans would strike somewhere else. When they tried to create kill zones, the humans would find alternative routes that bypassed them entirely. Most unnerving of all was how the humans communicated. The Velthari hive mind allowed instantaneous coordination across their entire force, but it also meant that every warrior knew exactly what every other warrior was thinking. The humans operated in small, independent groups that somehow maintained perfect coordination without any visible communication. Network.ze Qatar watched one group of 5 human soldiers neutralize a Velthari defensive position that should have been able to hold against 20 attackers. They moved like they shared a single mind, each soldier anticipating what the others would do without any apparent signals being passed between them. The lead soldier, a human female with short brown hair visible beneath her helmet, simply pointed at 2 different locations. 2 of her companions immediately moved to those positions without question or hesitation. The remaining 2 soldiers began setting up what appeared to be some kind of mechanical device. The Velthari defenders had no idea. They were being flanked until it was too late. The device the humans had placed turned out to be a localized EMP generator that disabled the insectoids' communication relay. Cut off from the hive mind, the Velthari warriors became confused and disoriented. Their natural coordination breaking down, the human soldiers struck with brutal efficiency, using non-lethal weapons to incapacitate their enemies rather than kill them. Within minutes, an entire defensive station had been neutralized without a single casualty on either side. Zektar made careful notes of everything he observed, but he found himself struggling to find the right words to describe what he was seeing. The humans weren't just winning, they were making it look effortless. Every tactic the Velthari employed was countered almost before it could be implemented. Every trap was avoided, every ambush was detected, Every defensive position was outmaneuvered. As the battle continued, Zektar began to understand why the human military files had emphasized tactical unpredictability. These weren't just soldiers following orders or executing pre-planned strategies. Each human warrior seemed capable of independent thought and decision-making at a level that was almost incomprehensible to species that relied on centralized command structures or hive mind coordination. When a group of humans encountered an unexpected obstacle, they didn't wait for new orders. 3 hours into the assault, Zektar witnessed something that would haunt his dreams for cycles to come. The human advance had reached the station's central hub, where the Valthari had concentrated their remaining forces for a final stand. The insectoids had chosen their position well, a massive chamber with multiple levels and excellent sightlines, defended by over 2,000 warriors and protected by energy barriers that could stop most known weapons. Any rational military commander would have called for siege, equipment, or orbital bombardment. The humans did neither. Instead, they did something that made Zektar question everything he thought he knew about the nature of courage and madness. A single human soldier, the same brown-haired female Zektar had observed earlier, volunteered to walk directly into the chamber alone, carrying nothing but a small communication device and a white cloth attached to her weapon. She was requesting a parley. The Valthari commander, a massive insectoid whose carapace bore the scars of 100 battles, agreed to meet with her. Through the station's communication system, Zektar could hear their exchange. "I am Colonel Sarah Chun of the Terra Marine Corps," the human said, her voice steady despite being surrounded by thousands of hostile aliens. "I'm here to offer your forces the opportunity to surrender." The Valthari commander's mandibles clicked in what Zektar recognized as insulting laughter. "You dare offer terms to the Hive? You are outnumbered 4-1, and this is our stronghold. What could you possibly threaten us with?" The human female, Chun, tilted her head slightly, and Zektar caught something in her expression that made his scales shift to deep orange again. It wasn't fear or desperation. It was something far more disturbing: pity. "I'm not threatening you with anything," Chun replied. "I'm trying to save your lives." The Valthari commander reared back, his warriors raising their weapons. "Save our lives? Human, you have lost your mind. We are in an impregnable position with overwhelming force." Chun nodded thoughtfully. "That's what you think, and I understand why. Your species has never faced an enemy like us before. You're fighting this battle using rules that worked against everyone else you've ever encountered. But those rules don't apply to humans. Explain." Chun looked around the chamber, studying the defensive positions with the casual interest of a tourist examining architecture. "Your entire strategy is based on the assumption that we'll fight you the way other species do. Mass assault, direct confrontation, conventional tactics. You've positioned your forces to counter exactly that kind of attack." The Valthari commander's confidence seemed to waver slightly. "What else is there? This is how war is fought." "Not by humans," Chun said simply. She activated her communication device. "Control, this is Chun. Begin Phase 2. What happened next defied every military doctrine Zektar had ever studied. The humans didn't attack the defensive positions. They attacked the station itself. Throughout the facility, human combat engineers activated devices they had placed during their advance through the maintenance tunnels. Not explosives, something far more insidious. They began systematically disabling the station's life support systems. The lights went out first, plunging the chamber into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on a moment later, but it was dim and unreliable. Then the atmospheric recycling units began shutting down. One by one, the Valthari were an insectoid species that had evolved in underground hives. Darkness didn't concern them, and they could hold their breath for extended periods. But they had made one crucial miscalculation. They had designed their fortress to be impregnable from the outside, not from within. "You see," Chun continued, her voice now coming through the communication system as she had apparently moved to a position where she could speak safely. "Every other species that tried to take this station assumed they had to defeat your army. But we realize something different. We don't have to fight you at all. We just have to make this place uninhabitable. The Velthari commander's voice crackled with rage and confusion. This is impossible. The life support systems are hardened against attack. Against external attack, yes. But we've been inside your station for 3 hours. Did you really think we were just wandering around shooting at random targets? Chion's tone remained conversational, almost friendly, while your warriors were focused on repelling our assault teams. Our engineers were taking apart your infrastructure piece by piece. Zektar watched the tactical displays with growing amazement as he realized the scope of what the humans had accomplished. They hadn't just infiltrated the station, they had systematically mapped and compromised every critical system. Power relays, communication networks, atmospheric processors, gravity generators, water recycling plants, everything that made the facility habitable was now under human control. The Velthari began to understand their situation. Panicked clicking filled the communication channels as they realized that their impregnable fortress had become a trap. They could fight and die in the dark and thin air, or they could surrender and live. But Qin wasn't finished demonstrating human ingenuity. I know what you're thinking, she continued. Your ships can evacuate you, or you can try to retake the vital systems. Let me explain why neither of those options will work. The main display lit up with tactical information that made Zektar's blood run cold. The 3 human cruisers that had disabled the Velthari dreadnought were now positioned around the station, but they weren't preparing to attack. They were generating some kind of interference field that was blocking all communication between the station and the insectoid fleet. Your ships can't even detect what's happening here right now, Chun explained. As far as they know, you're still in control and winning. They won't come to investigate until your scheduled check-in, which isn't for another 6 hours. And as for retaking the life support systems, new indicators appeared on the tactical display. Every critical junction and maintenance area throughout the station now showed human defensive positions. The soldiers who had seemed to be randomly infiltrating the facility had actually been establishing a secondary control network. They now held every point that would be necessary to repair the damage they had caused. We control every system you need to survive, Chun said, and we're prepared to defend those positions indefinitely. Your choice is simple: surrender now, or we'll see who can last longer without air. The Velthari commander's voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. This is not how war is supposed to work. No, Chun agreed. It's how humans fight. The surrender came 20 minutes later. As Zektar watched the Velthari, warriors laying down their weapons and submitting to human custody, he began to understand why the galaxy was learning to fear Earth's children. It wasn't their technology or their numbers or their physical capabilities that made them dangerous. It was their minds. Every other species in the galaxy fought war like a ritual. There were rules, conventions, accepted strategies that had been refined over millennia. The Velthari had mastered this kind of warfare, which was why they had dominated this sector for 3 centuries. But humans didn't think like that. They looked at every problem as a puzzle to be solved, not a battle to be won according to established doctrine. They were capable of reimagining the fundamental nature of conflict itself. Zektar continued recording as he watched human soldiers efficiently processing prisoners and securing the station. They moved with the same casual competence they had shown throughout the engagement, as if conquering an impregnable fortress was just another day's work. But what disturbed him most was observing the individual humans more closely. He had expected to see soldiers who had been driven to extreme measures by desperation or bloodlust. Instead, he saw professionals who had simply approached a complex problem and solved it in the most efficient way possible. Colonel Chun, who had just forced the surrender of 2,000 enemy warriors without firing a shot, was now coordinating medical treatment for Velthari who had been injured during the evacuation. She moved between the prisoners, checking on their welfare and ensuring they were being treated according to Galactic conventions for prisoners of war. When one of the insectoid warriors spat in her face and called her a soft-shelled deceiver, Chun simply wiped off the spittle and made sure the warrior received his proper share of medical attention. You hate us, she told the warrior conversationally while a medic tended to a cut on his carapace. I understand that. We just did something to you that you thought was impossible. We took everything you believed about warfare and turned it upside down. The warrior's mandibles clicked aggressively. You fight without honor. You use tricks and deception instead of strength. Chun considered this seriously. You're right. We don't fight the way you do. But tell me something, how many of your people died here today? The warrior hesitated. 17 wounded. None killed. And how many humans died taking this station? Another pause. None, Chun nodded. So our dishonorable tactics resulted in fewer casualties on both sides than any honorable battle ever would have. Which approach shows more respect for life? The warrior had no answer for that. Sektar found himself pondering the same question as he watched the aftermath of the battle. Every military engagement he had ever studied involved massive casualties on both sides. War. Sektar thought he understood humans after witnessing their conquest of the mining station. He was wrong. The revelation came 3 days later, when he was granted permission to interview Colonel Chun aboard the human command ship. What she told him changed everything he thought he knew about Earth's children and their place in the galaxy. You're writing a report about our tactics? Chun said, settling into a chair across from him in the ship's briefing room. What do you think you learned? Sektar consulted his notes, though by now he had memorized every detail of the engagement. Your species approaches warfare differently than others. You use unconventional tactics, innovative thinking, and you prioritize efficiency over traditional concepts of honor or glory. Chun smiled. And there was something in that expression that made Sektar's scales shift color again. That's all true, but you're missing the bigger picture. Tell me, what do you know about human military doctrine? I've studied the files the hegemony provided. Your species has a complex history of warfare, with numerous conflicts and a wide variety of tactical approaches developed over millennia of fighting. Good, and what did those files tell you about our current military strength? Sektar hesitated. This was the part that had never made sense to him. According to the data, Earth maintains a total military force of approximately 2 million active personnel across all services. Your fleet consists of roughly 300 ships of various classes, most of which are classified as light by galactic standards. Chun nodded. And how does that compare to other major powers? The Velthari Hive maintains 12 million warriors and over 2,000 ships. The Krexni Empire has 8 million soldiers and 1,500 dreadnoughts. Even the smallest member of the Galactic Council fields larger forces than humanity. So by the numbers, we're insignificant, Chun said. A minor power that shouldn't be able to threaten anyone, let alone the established galactic order? Yes, which makes your victory here even more remarkable. Chun leaned back in her chair. Observer Sektar, let me tell you a story about why the galaxy has learned to fear us. And it's not because of what you saw at the mining station. She activated a holographic display that showed a star map of known space. Hundreds of systems glowed in different colors, representing the various powers and their territories. When humans first made contact with galactic civilization 50 years ago, we were exactly what we appeared to be, a primitive species from a backwater world with outdated technology and a tiny military. The hegemony offered us membership because they thought we'd be useful as a client state. Cheap labor, raw materials, maybe some innovative thinking to solve minor problems. The display zoomed in on Earth's local sector, showing the gradual expansion of human presence throughout nearby systems. But the Council made a critical error in judgment. They assumed that because our military was small, we weren't a military threat. They were focused on the wrong metrics entirely. I don't understand. Chun smiled again, and this time Sektar recognized the expression. It was the same look he had seen on her face when she offered the Velthari commander the chance to surrender, pity. Every major power in the galaxy maintains standing armies measured in the millions because that's how galactic warfare has always worked. Massive fleets, huge armies, direct confrontation between major forces. The bigger your military, the more territory you can control and defend. She highlighted several systems on the map, showing fleet movements and deployment patterns. But humans didn't try to compete in that arena. Instead, we asked a different question. What if you don't need a massive military to project power? What if you can accomplish the same goals with a tiny, highly trained force that thinks completely outside established doctrine? The display shifted to show recent conflicts throughout the galaxy. Zektar counted dozens of engagements, from border skirmishes to major territorial disputes. Over the past 50 years, human forces have been involved in 43 military actions. We've never deployed more than 10,000 troops to any single engagement, and most operations used fewer than 500 soldiers. In every case, we achieved our objectives with minimal casualties on both sides. Zektar studied the data with growing unease. But these are mostly minor conflicts. Border disputes, police actions, peacekeeping operations. Look closer. Chun highlighted specific battles, and Zektar felt his blood turn cold as he recognized the patterns. The Sigma Rebellion, where human advisors helped a small insurgent force overthrow a planetary government that had been backed by Krexni shock troops. The Vega Incident, where a single human cruiser prevented a war between two major powers by disabling both fleets without firing a shot. The liberation of Proxima, where human marines broke a siege that had lasted for 3 years by infiltrating the attacking fleet and convincing them to withdraw. Every major conflict in the past 5 decades has been influenced by human intervention. Chun continued. Not through massive military campaigns, but through small, precise operations that change the entire balance of power. That's impossible, Zektar protested. The galactic intelligence networks would have detected such widespread human involvement. Would they? Chun asked. When the Velthari conquered this sector 300 years ago, they did it with overwhelming force. Massive fleets, millions of warriors, obvious and undeniable military superiority. Every species in the galaxy knew exactly what was happening and who was responsible. The display shifted to show human operations in detail. Small teams, minimal equipment, operations that lasted hours or days rather than months or years. When humans change the balance of power, we do it so quietly that most people don't even realize it's happening until it's over. The Sigma Rebellion looks like a grassroots uprising. The Vega Incident appears to be a diplomatic triumph. The Proxima liberation seems like the besiegers simply lost interest. Zektar was beginning to understand, and the realization terrified him. You're saying that humans have been manipulating galactic politics for 50 years without anyone noticing. Not manipulating, Chun corrected. Solving problems? The difference is important. She brought up another display. This one showing economic and political data from across the galaxy. When we took this mining station, we weren't just capturing a strategic resource. We were demonstrating to every major power that their most secure positions can be taken by a handful of human soldiers using tactics they've never seen before. More importantly, we were proving that the rules of galactic warfare that have existed for millennia are obsolete. The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. You're saying that no defensive position is safe. No fortress can be considered impregnable. No conventional military strategy can be trusted to work against human forces. Now you're beginning to understand why the galaxy dreads us. Chun stood and walked to the observation port, looking out at the mining station that was already being converted to human specifications. Every empire in the galaxy is based on the same fundamental principle: superior force projection. The Velthari rule their sector because they have the biggest fleet and the most warriors. The Krexni maintain their borders because their dreadnoughts can destroy anything that challenges them. The entire galactic order depends on predictable military equations. She turned back to face Zektar, and her expression was serious now. But humans don't play by those equations. We've proven that a tiny force using unconventional tactics can defeat any traditional military, regardless of size or technological advantage. We've shown that the most secure positions can be taken. The most powerful fleets can be neutralized. and the most established military doctrines can be rendered useless. And that threatens the entire foundation of galactic civilization. Exactly. June returned to her seat. Every major power is now forced to consider the possibility that their military superiority is an illusion, that all their dreadnoughts and armies and fortresses are just expensive symbols that won't protect them if humans decide they need to be removed. Zektar felt his scales cycling through colors as he processed the implications. But humans are still vastly outnumbered. Even with superior tactics, you couldn't conquer the galaxy with only 2 million soldiers. You're still thinking conventionally, Chun said gently. Conquer? Why would we want to conquer anything? Conquest requires occupation, administration, resource management, dealing with rebellions and resistance movements. It's expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately ineffective. The display changed again, showing the current political structure of the galaxy. Instead of conquering, we solve problems. If a planetary government is oppressing its people, we help the people fix that. If a trade dispute is threatening to start a war, we find a solution that benefits everyone. If a terrorist group is threatening shipping lanes, we eliminate the threat. And in doing so, you reshape the galaxy to your preferences. To everyone's benefit, Chun corrected. The thing that truly terrifies the established powers isn't our military capability. It's the fact that we're usually right. She highlighted specific examples, conflicts that had been resolved peacefully thanks to human intervention, economic disputes that had been settled fairly, oppressive governments that had been replaced with more democratic alternatives. Every time humans intervene in a situ,